Linux Security Part 2. In this nugget, we're going to talk about TCP wrappers, which allow us to restrict access to all the services on our system with just a couple of configuration files. Then we'll talk about PAM, which has to do with authentication for services on our system. And finally, we'll cover firewalls, and specifically IP tables, which is the firewall command used in the 2.4 kernel. Let's get to work. All right, well, let's begin by talking about TCP wrappers. Now, TCP wrappers allow or deny access to all the ZynetD applications sort of in one fell swoop. Okay? Basically, there's two files out there in the etc directory. One's called host.allow, and the other one's called host.deny. And you can specify in these files which hosts are allowed access to your system and which hosts are denied access to your system. Okay, that seems pretty intuitive by the names. But you can also restrict, which services particular hosts can access and so on. All right. So basically, what happens is ZynetD is out there listening for certain traffic on the various ports of the services that it's managing. Okay, and it gets some request. Well, the first thing that it does is it passes control over to TCP wrappers, and TCP wrappers then the thing it does is it looks for a match found in host.allow. If it finds a match in host.allow, it tells Zynet that yes, access is granted. Go ahead, grant them access. Go about your business. Okay. If no matches are found in host.allow, then it goes down to host.deny. Okay, so if it finds a match there, then it tells Zynet that actually access is denied and refuse access to this particular request. And if it doesn't find matches in either one, then TCP wrapper says, okay, access is granted, control is passed back to you, and then Zynet takes over. Okay, you don't even have to do any more tests. And then optional, basically just, it doesn't matter, okay? The test is done, but it doesn't matter whether you pass or fail this test. If you've passed everything else up until this point, then you're going to be granted access to the shell. All right, so that's the four things: requisite, required, sufficient, and optional. All right, now let's talk about what these various things mean, these tests that you have to pass. So let's take a look and understand what the libsecurity PAM secureTTY.so module, what it actually does. So what we're going to do here is we're going to go over to this other shell window, and you can see the working directory I'm in for that shell. It's called user share doc / the PAM with the version that of PAM that I'm using /txts. Okay. Now inside of this directory are a bunch of README files, and there's a README file here for each of the modules that you can use with PAM. The one that we were talking about there was PAM_secureTTY. Okay, just to refresh your memory, let's go back to this window, and you can see it's PAM secureTTY. All right, so that's the file that we want to read. All right, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to say more readme.pam/secureTTY. Okay, and this is going to tell us what the secureTTY library does for us, what that module does for us. So what it says is it allows root logins only if the user is logging in on a secure terminal. What's a secure terminal? Well, it's defined by the listing in /etc/secureTTY. Okay. It also makes sure that etc secureTTY is a plain file and is not world writable. It makes sure it's not world writable so that I couldn't go in there beforehand, put in my terminal that I'm trying to log in on as root, and gain access to the system that way. Okay, so we're only talking about root logins here, and we're only allowing root logins for terminals that are listed as secure. Okay, now going back to this other window, you can see that that particular module, that test, in other words, is required. All right, so if this is not met, then you will not be gained access to the shell. All right, and notice this module only had the packet, or do you reject the packet? Okay, so let's just look at some examples of some rules, some IP tables rules. So here I can say IP tables -a input -s this IP address -j drop. So what this is saying is packets that are coming to my system from this source IP address, I want to drop. Okay, so that's what's going to happen to the packets coming from that IP address if they're destined for my particular local network. Okay, here what I'm saying is -a forward -j drop. So this is saying I'm filtering out all packets that I would just forward. I'm just going to drop those packets. I'm not going to act as a forwarding box for some other router. Okay, and then this one here is IP tables minus D, so I'm deleting some rule, and the rule that I'm deleting is this one that I created up here. So here I give the exact same specifications that I gave up there, except I use the minus D option instead of the minus A option, and that would delete that rule from my tables, from my list of options of which I'm filtering packets. Alright, well, it's time to wrap up our second nugget on Linux security, and this is actually the last video in the series, and we're going to wrap up the whole series too. So we started this nugget by talking about TCP wrappers. Now, TCP wrappers gave us a way to allow or deny access to services on our system using the host.allow and host.deny files in the etc directory. And then we talked about pluggable authentication modules. And for the applications that are PAM aware, we saw that we can change the method of the authentication used for those applications without having to do anything like modifying source code or recompiling the source code. And finally, we just talked about firewalls, and I showed you how to use IP tables and gave you some examples of simple packet filtering rules that you could use. And finally, I just wanted to say that, even if this series was 500 videos long, I know there would still be some topic that I wouldn't cover that you might want to know about. But what I've done is that I've given you enough of an exposure to Linux, and I've helped you become capable of digging up information on your own and learning about whatever aspect of Linux you want to. I really do hope you found this series informative, and thanks so much for watching.